TV. I am here in the beautiful state of Utah. I'm looking out the window here at rolling hills. It's beyond my comprehension. Living in New Jersey, seeing what I'm seeing here. And the most important part of why I'm in Utah is because en route to California to see family, I have stopped in to speak with Clint Richardson, who I've done many podcasts with and learned so much from. And I'm here now in the lovely state of Utah with Clint Richardson, and we're going to have a conversation, and here we go. Clint, it's super awesome to be here with you. Thank you so much.
What if we can't find anything to talk about?
Here's the thing. We've over the last 24 hours, or going on almost 24 hours, Clint picked me up at the international airport, and we went out and got a bite to eat. We went to the grocery store to grab some food and sustenance, and we've had some really, really intense conversations that I was like, we should be recording this. And then at the same time, we're thinking, we're both thinking that once the recorder starts, then the whole mode of conversation changes, because there's, like it happens to so many people, like video or audio. When people get their picture taken and they don't know it, they're more relaxed, they're more natural. When they do, then it's all like, oh, is my hair this?
Well, the notion that it used to be improper or strange or really weird that people would actually smile to a camera. Mm-hmm. Now, it's like, what happens if people act strange in front of cameras, and we're looking at music videos and just talking about music, but if people start looking at, if cameras are everywhere, then are people going to start acting like a-holes everywhere and all the time because they think they're on camera all the time? Mm-hmm. This is CCTV, 24 hours. Are people going to blow kisses at the cameras and pretend like they're all stars? It's just a really strange effect that the camera has on people and the way they act. And most of the things that people do now, most of the actions or the memes that people, pointing at the camera and doing this, making signs at the camera. It's so strange when you look at it and you think, well, what if the camera wasn't there? What fools these people would look like? They're pandering and playing to the camera as if it's the window to the whole world. And it's just really strange. It's changing people's behaviors in ways that I don't really care for. And I was specifically saying I don't like music videos because they're so fake, and they're lip singing. It's not real. They're trying to look like they're really into what they're doing. It's just, I can't stand the fakeness of things anymore, right? It's just, it's getting to that point where it's a simulation, that everything is not real. You can't go anywhere. You can't turn on anything without something being fake. It's a strange time.
It's not natural.
Yeah.
There's nothing natural, grassroots. I mean, there's probably a few things that are happening just on levels, that conversations that people are having without being recorded, or that at least that they know of. And so, yeah, it definitely changes things. And one of the things that popped into our heads, and we were sitting here talking about the 80s and reveling in a lot of the music and the purity of bands like The Fix, bands like Tears for Fears, and we thought of, or Clint thought of, Video Killed the Radio Star, which was the very first video that was played on MTV, which went from just videos being played like all day of The Fix, of all of these incredible bands, and then it goes to 16 and Pregnant, and just all of this
and I actually
awful shit.
I actually said as we were talking, I said, it's like video kills the music. And then I was like, oh, hey, video kills the radio. So, I mean, it's a true statement, because if you think about, you remember, I mean, I only unfortunately heard the reruns of it, but I used to tune into the AM station and listen to those old broadcasts of radio, people telling stories and the comedy routines and the live music. One of the points that, I mean, even this, and this is probably a strange concept to most people, but I was reading, because I'm researching it for my book, but I was reading Simulacrum and Simulation again, and he mentioned how stereo, having the stereo sound actually tainted music. It didn't improve it, it actually made it worse. But it sounds better. But you're taking the single source of sound, and you're pretty much making it a sort of a multiverse kind of thing where it's all around you. So it actually, even though we think it sounds better, and quite honestly, it sounds incredible, but it's also taking away from the reality of the sound, which is a single source. My violin is not meant to be listened to in stereo, right? So truly, technology has ruined music in ways you don't comprehend. I never would have thought about that. I would have never, because he's talking about, the simulation and what music was when it was from a single source. Now it's a simulation, which is what stereo is, because there's no stereo in nature, right?
Right.
And if you think about that for a moment, you're like, yeah, even though it sounds really great and it has all this back and forth, Led Zeppelin's that kind of thing, but it actually ruined the purity, or the source, the true nature of music. Sorry, my dogs. And I hadn't considered that before. And yet you'll hear the old AM songs and people, that sounds like crap. And well, yeah, because you're not listening to it in reality. You're listening to it on a source that doesn't exist in reality. And yet you can go out into nature, go to a stream, go to any place, and you hear it in this sort of natural surround sound, almost like a stream, right? It fills the air, and it's this all these different sounds going on. But when it comes to music, his point, I think, is well received, that it destroyed the purity of how things really sound. And I was taken aback by that, because I'd never thought of that. That's why it's such an important book to me, because it makes me just really go over all the things that I thought were true.
Simulacrum and simulation.
Right, because you start believing that the truth is stereo is truth, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? It takes you away from source. And so many things in life now take you away from source, from what is the real thing. And this video thing, it's the way people act in front of a camera. Now, me, I shirk away from camera. I don't like putting myself in my videos. You've done it from time to time. I remember you did that. Sure, if I have to, like when I'm confronting I used to do that guerrilla journalism where I'd confront these people, and there's no way not to. But for the rest of the time, I don't want to be on
you don't
camera, because it just distracts,
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I was listening to, I stumbled upon Crow 777's podcast, and then, of course, there was Corporation Nation in the list. I'm like, did they interview Clint? And sure enough, they did, and it was another incredible, and it was an extended podcast. Because
I talk a lot.
And so, and listening to some of Crow's other stuff, where he mentioned like the creation of the CD, the creation of music sharing on the internet from Napster and all this other stuff. Like all these things were done strategically on some level, whereas you have a CD now, and you have to buy like the whole thing as opposed to getting one song, and things like that. So there was a strategic thing about it, and of course that's probably just like one aspect of what music is done. And then also I'm thinking about stereo, right? Where mono, where you pointed out. Now stereo has the ability to not only affect the left hemisphere but also the right hemisphere of the brain. So I'm thinking that there's a multi-pronged thing that's going on here with music and sound. And not only that, a number of years ago, I start hearing these things about, how the 440 hertz A is unnatural, where it's actually supposed to be like something out, like it was changed in some way because it was less harmonic to the body, so it was changed.
I wouldn't say that it's unnatural because it's a hertz. You're measuring it by a man-made thing. Mm-hmm. No sound is technically when you're measuring it by its hertz or by its frequency. There is no limit. I mean, you can get as small and as high in the jumps from frequencies as you want. There is no real limitation there, right? It can go up in levels that are inaudible. So the measurement that we use to that goes back to Royal Rife and all those frequencies where certain organisms have a destructive frequency. So you want to kill a parasite, but you don't want to harm the good cells, or you don't want to harm the good bugs, but you want to focus on one specific parasite. So he researched that, okay, this particular parasite or this particular cell or this bug or whatever has a destructive frequency. It's not unnatural. It's just that frequency when put on that particular organism is destructive. Well, if your goal is to be destructive, then you would choose a range of the spectrum, which 440, right?
Right.
Which would be destructive to human, not necessarily destructive, but not spiritual
Offsetting.
Or not, something that's just not resonant.
Something that's just not resonant on point.
Right. It doesn't necessarily need to harm you, but it also doesn't take you into a spiritual mode, if you will. It takes you it kind of does the opposite, right? And I think that's what that refers to. But to say it's unnatural, I don't think would be a correct, because I don't think there is such a thing.
My layman's approach to it, but I understand.
But I think there was a definite. I mean, if you do all that research and you look into it, it's and a lot of people have been tuning, retuning. But see, then there's
they say it's very like that change to the more harmonic, resonant one is just very, because I was thinking like, what do I have to do on my guitar? Do I have to take the G and raise it up to, this? I said the strings are gonna. I'm gonna stretch a note, and the string's gonna just pop.
Right.
But it's not that. It's different.
I've gotten to the point now where I don't actually pay attention. Like, I know everybody wants to tune their instruments, and if I was playing with a group, and of course we tune our instruments, but I just pretty much pick up my guitar and find a string that sounds pleasant, or find a tone that sounds pleasant, and then tune all their strings to that. And I don't care if it's out of tune, if it's up or down. To me, it's just it's good practice for tonality, right? Now there is something that I would be cautious of, and that's people like Len Horowitz.
Right, his 528
his whole love frequency, which, and I'm doing this from memory, so please forgive me if I'm incorrect.
I know a little bit about it as well.
Well, in his first book that he came out with, I believe, I'm not. This has been a long time because this is something I was discussing with Truott 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. But apparently, in his first book, he listed that 528 frequency as something really toxic, really just destructive to the human body, and then all of a sudden he's calling it the love frequency. And him and Truott, they're at odds with each other. They're like ancient enemies. Their families. Horowitz is the consummate prince of the Jews, and Truott is this giant redheaded Viking, family that was royalty back then.
Dare I say the
and so they're
bloodline?
completely at odds with each other, right? And they're so Horowitz was the one that Truott believes anyway that Horowitz was the one that got him. He comes and visits Truott, and then 2 weeks later, the FDA comes in and swarms his whole, operation, and then the rest of the history that they have. But
right.
I remember him explaining to me, you're going to be careful with a lot of these people. It's no different than anything, really. CBD, for instance, which everybody's selling right now, but none of it's actually the good stuff or pure, right? It's all crap because you have to have THC with CBD for it to work, and there's all so much sham out there. But when you're talking about something like a frequency, especially after if you studied Royal Rife and all the people, was it Pauling? No, he was the vitamin C guy. There's a bunch of guys that did followed, and Truott did a lot of stuff on this too. You look at the frequency stuff. You do not want to go onto YouTube, for instance, and listen to some video that says this is the love frequency, listen to this over and over and over, put it on loop, and just blast your head with it. It's actually, you don't mess with frequencies like that, you got to be crazy to do stuff like that. And the other example that he used, which I find fascinating, because Truott his family was high up in the Mormon cult. Right, the Mormon hierarchy is part of the quorum of the 50.
Is
or
that
whatever.
something that he graduated out of, or?
Well, yeah, because he was healing people because he healed himself, and then he started healing people, healing incurable cancers and shit with this machine that he had, this frequency machine that it's fantastic. I wish I had one here, but I lent it to a friend. But he. The church came to him, and this is why he left the church finally. The church came to him and said, look, and he was like high up on the radio circuit. He was about to become a sort of a big radio host.
He was rooted in the Tao of
right.
Mormonism.
And they came to him and said, look, we understand that you've got some, you've been using, you've done the research, and you found out all these secrets and stuff. But the Mormon Church owns. That's a big asset that we have. The Mormon Church, the corporation soul itself, is it has so much. When I researched it, the amount of corporations that are in it are amazing. They owned all the talk radio stations in Washington.
Are they some of the usual suspects as well?
Oh, like your railroads and all that. You go back to the 1800s when they had them before Congress, and they're asking them all the companies that the church owned. Mm-hmm. They funded Las Vegas. It's a huge conglomerate thing, a holding company for all kinds of different stuff. And like I said, they owned all the radio stations in Washington, D.C. And as soon as people, including myself, not just me, but as soon as we started reporting on that, then the church decided they were going to just sell all these assets, but they sold them to people in the church to keep it in the church, and they still own all the frickin' radio stations in Washington. So imagine all the talk radio stations in Washington, D.C. being Mormon owned, essentially, by they used to be in one conglomerate corporation.
Connection to Masonry as well?
Oh, yeah, we actually, when we were doing We Are Change here, we had a member who he grew up Mormon, of course, and he couldn't believe. He was like, "No, there's no Masonry there." So we took him on a trip to BYU, Brigham Young University, and we went through their museum, and there it was the most hilarious thing. It's like, how much more proof do you need? There's a picture of the sports team back from back when photos were still black and white and everything. And there's this like football, I think it was, team with the old kind of helmets,
Yeah,
and on their jerseys was the compass and the square.
Okay.
The compass and the square was the motto of their, the symbol of their team.
No G in the middle?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, the G?
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. And we showed him that, and he's like, okay, I give up. I'm not going to argue anymore. Right? It's Mason. It's like Masonry revamped into a corporation soul and called a religion, basically. Anyway, the frequency stuff, yeah. What Truott did is he took a bunch of us to the big conference center downtown, biggest conference center in the world, right down in the we call it the Vatican of Utah. It's the Mormon center downtown. I should have taken you there last night, but and in there is some of the most sophisticated technology I've ever seen, and they have this pipe organ, and everybody loves the pipe organ, right? And you go in there, and you can sit there and listen to that organ play. And what he said is that people come out of there, and they say, when that organ plays, I feel God. It's like a connection to God. I feel it in my heart, right? I feel this incredible feeling in my heart. I know it's God. I'm connecting to God when when I'm in that conference center, this horrible looking conference center, right? It's a total commercial thing. And there's that pipe organ and it's playing. You look at that pipe organ, there are so many pipes going on, small to big. And he says, and Truott says, look, that pipe organ goes up into the inaudible range of hearing by I think he said 6 different octaves. So if you imagine a piano that extends, another 10 keys up to the point where you can't even hear it. Yeah, past the 20,000 range and all the way past the 20 to 20,000 hertz or whatever is the audible human hearing, and it goes then down into this deep range that you can only feel, you can't hear. So here's this giant organ playing notes that the human body can't hear, but just because you can't hear it
doesn't mean it doesn't affect
doesn't mean it's not a frequency.
Yeah.
And that frequency, again, when played the certain notes, it hits you and it makes you feel the Spirit of God, right? This whatever that feeling is that you feel connected somehow, right? And all it is they're pumping you full of frequencies and they're brainwashing people.
Maybe it's chipping the calcium off the pineapple gland, and then they're just like, hey.
Well, there's
doing something, good or bad. It might. I mean, if there's something that makes people feel good. That can't be a bad, but you have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, but see, I would like
to. Yeah, I would. I would like to check that out.
When you're not disclosing the fact that you're pumping people full of frequencies that alter and make you suggestible or make you feel a certain way, to me that's pure evil. Okay, I don't care how good it makes you feel. I don't know how bad it makes you feel. That's just evil. That is forcing something on somebody, and then having them feel something and say, "Wow, I really, this Mormon shit. I really believe it because it makes me feel this way. When I hear that organ, I'm
it's doing something."
Yeah, it's to me, it's that non-disclosure part is what really bothers me. But
it's part of that. It kind of goes a full circle back to the U.S. Code, where they can do whatever they want to us.
Yeah, and it's not like you can't. I mean, you can. It's been so long now that I've even messed with that. But the other thing is, on top of there, they have they call it the Garden of Gethsemane from the Bible, which again is this sort of evil type of place, right? Everything they do is Zion and all these different things. There's nothing. There's nothing good about what they do. It's just it's really horrible. But
they're definitely pretty. They're probably. Is there a Baal thing there as well? I know that they built these 2 Baal arches in New York City and in London as well.
I'd have to think about that. See, the problem with Baal, the word Baal actually means God.
Right. Lord.
Right, or Lord, God. And so people confuse that and they say, God is actually the devil, or Jesus is the devil, and Baal, because the word Baal is used, but it's just a generic term that means Lord God, right? So it gets confusing, yeah.
All the different Apollo, Gilgamesh, all these different...
It depends how you use the word. If you capitalize it, then it's referring to Baal. as a god. If you don't capitalize it, just refers to any god, and so people get confused. Of course, that's why words are so important.
Right.
But yeah, as far as the frequencies and everything, I honestly don't know if this, what is it, 44.1 or something. I can't remember what everybody's tuning their guitars to and everything, and thinking that somehow makes music more spiritual, or some people say it doesn't sound as good. I don't know if that's making any
apparently
difference.
There's websites when I interviewed Crow and Jason Lindgren. After I spoke with somebody that they had, I reached out to somebody that they had on the show, and then next thing you know, they reached out to me, and I was just going, "Oh, cool, wow. Somebody again." And I really like what Crow and Jason are doing. I really think that they're with those guys, it's pure heart, and they really get down, they really drill down, pretty deep. Thus, Jason knowing about you and being very interested in what you were doing. Jason. And that always makes me feel good when you hear somebody is interested, in your work, because it's, as I said any number of times, I think it's you really do have a gift, and a lot of these really good, from the creator, these characteristics that make you and your work very just awesome to me. So
well, I appreciate
feel good about it. Feeling good about it.
Sometimes it feels more like a curse than anything, but and you take these concepts, right, of things that are being, that we talked about the stereo and the mono is actually the one that is real, or if you will, closer to, if you're listening to a speaker, of course it's not real.
Right.
But the point is well taken with me, because you don't think about that kind of thing. But if you transfer that and you apply it to every other aspect of what we call life, well, then it carries out some big parallels. You could say money, for instance, right? Money, the way that money. You could say money started out as a good thing, in a way, because it was used specifically for trade. In other words, it was an agreed upon thing that my cow was worth 10 of your chickens, and that was considered a monetary, if you will, transaction, a commercial transaction of fairness, of agreement,
bartering.
Right?
I need this, you need this.
Well, yeah, and
you're important to me.
Also, intention. Your intention is not to harm. Your intention is, I need chickens, you need a cow. What is an equal balance?
How do we do this?
How do we do this? And that, in that sense, the money concept makes sense. I wouldn't even call it money, though, because when you're talking about money, and money being the root of all evil, which is a very true statement, then you're talking about mammon, which means valuation. You're putting a false value on things, right? And that's where interest and grocery. We were talking about this. We were at the store yesterday, and I just couldn't help but sit there.
Market.
Yeah, Whole Foods, which is just, I think Whole Foods is a freaking scam, personally. But I'm sitting there, and I just can't help but think in my mind, this is grocery. This is absurd grocery, and grocery used to be a crime. To engross or to gross, it was gross behavior, and it was a crime because you're taking, you're collecting products, you're collecting things, and then selling them for an outrageous, unfair, unequal price, right? And so in that way, you could compare the mono sound, the real sound, which is unaltered, to the stereo sound, where suddenly you're adding interest or grocery or some outrageous markup to the price. So you've just turned something which has a specific value, like they sell an avocado for $2 at frickin' Whole Foods, and it's not like I can say, well, that's a bit high. My chicken is certainly worth more than your 2 avocados, but if you're going to charge a chicken, I guess, it just doesn't work until you apply these tricks, this deception, this evil that is, all the interest and the valuation, and you're marking up the price, and it's grocery, and I can't stress enough.
And then you really double down on it, and Jeff Bezos owns it.
I know, right? And all restaurants are whatever, Cisco. It's funny, you go to the finest restaurant, there's a fucking Cisco truck in front of it. You go to McDonald's, there's a fucking Cisco truck in front of it. So you're getting the same food, it's just prepared different, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that concept of adding something to anything, it doesn't matter whether it's adding that stereo effect to the mono, or whether it's adding interest onto money, or even money and replacing money, or replacing a chicken with money. It's the reason they call it this sort of gateway to evil is because you're putting a false value on it. And you start to realize that applies to everything. It's not just a monetary thing. Mammon is actually the value we place on artificial things that in nature doesn't exist, right? It affects the whole economy. It affects the lifestyle of people, and it's of course the main way that corporations and very bad people are so wealthy. Right,
yep.
Which completely goes against the law of nature. Do unto others as you have to. Don't be, if you're. What's my favorite one is no one can be wealthy, or you can't be wealthy. Their basic rule is you should have no wealth until all others are already wealthy, which essentially cuts out any notion of wealth, because you're ensuring that all others are taken care of, right? But that's not the way we operate, because we have this false value. We're after money. And when I say we're after money, we're after mammon, we're after the value of things, but not the thing itself. We don't really care about the truth anymore. We only care about the value that's placed upon the truth. So everything has become a simulation or a fiction. And when your pursuit when your pursuit is after money instead of all the good things in life, then we were talking about that Fix song, right? How much is enough? Yep. When your soul is empty, how much is enough? In the land of plenty, how much is enough? Right? Until you've taken and absolutely engrossed everything that's good, and you won't give it to anybody unless they pay you an outrageous, unequal value.
That's why socialism is such a taboo. I mean, we know that capitalism, and I mean, you pointed this out largely to me, capita per the head, and just the usury that goes along with it. And even when I spoke with Dean Henderson, he said, socialism is spoken down upon because it would make more, if it was done the right way, it would make more of an equal system.
Well, so here's the problem.
If it was done the right way.
Here's the problem. I told you that in my opinion, the Bible is the ultimate instruction book, but it's also the ultimate self-help book.
Basic instructions before leaving Earth.
It's the only. Yeah. Well, no. Forget about this so-called afterlife. Okay. If you're living this life, and this was actually a religion, I think the Puritans were the ones that really started this. That anything you do in this life is for the next life, right? So you're fucking everybody in this life, in order to get your place in the next life, which is
and then you pray for and ask
that is not
for a
biblical.
Year to get into them.
That is not biblical in any way, shape, or form, and yet that became sort of the Christian thought: is that I can do anything I want to as long as I believe in this. And I get saved, and therefore I've got my eternal place. And no, the Bible is in no way an instruction book on going to heaven. That's a religious thing. That's man-made. The Bible is a set of laws, right, that you follow in order to have exactly what we're talking about, which is everybody taking care of everybody. So when you're talking about a system like capitalism, socialism, communism, these are not biblical. They're very anti-biblical. And the reason I say that is because it's not coming from you. You're not the source of it. Something else is. And you're following that source, which is not God, it's man, and you're following that law that has to do with socialism or democracy or this or that, right? It's not coming from you. And therefore, you think, and by you, I'm being general, we all think, well, hey, I don't have to be charitable. I can give my money to a charity. Right? So you've taken the act of being charitable at all times to all people, and you've said, well, I don't have to do it. There's a corporation. It's called charity. So there's this fake artificial person that's called a charity, and if I give money, the root of all evil, to that charity, then somehow I'm fulfilling God's word. I'm fulfilling the law of nature, which says I must take care of everything in nature, everything, right? But as long as I give money, right, a construct of man, and said to be the root of all evil, which I completely concur with, then you're replacing your duty, and that is what the whole legal system. I don't care what system it is; it takes away your duty, and the only way that socialism as an ideal will ever work is if its source is you and me and everyone else. It cannot
no corporation.
It cannot be a central corporate structure.
Because if it's a corporate structure, then there's some form of capitalism in there. And
right. So
we'll
this
totally negate.
This goes back to mono versus stereo, right? To everything that is right supposed to be coming from you. You're saying, okay, let's put it on to government. Right, this.
Let somebody else take care of it.
Right. And so nothing is ever going to work. Nothing, no idea, nothing will ever work until you leave that system and you start doing things yourself to each other, for each other, in a trusting and in a charitable way. These are the highest laws, right?
Yeah.
But
we've seen examples of it, like when people. I think it happened in like Chester, PA, which is generally a very, very downtrodden, low, area of suburban Philadelphia, and people were, you can just go and have like a truck and be like and give people food because the authorities there will be like, you're not allowed.
Oh, that's illegal.
Allowed to do that. That's illegal.
That's real charity. We don't allow that here.
We don't allow.
That's what I'm saying. It's illegal to love. It's illegal to be charitable. It's illegal to actually do anything moral. And I really want people to understand that, because when people are debating, well, we should have socialism, we should have communism, we should have democracy, we should have all these things, they're not really thinking it through, are they? They're not thinking of what I should do. Yeah. They're thinking of what government should force us to do. And you're never going to have a moral... There's no such thing as a moral government. There's no such thing as a moral man in a position of power, because power corrupts absolutely. You give someone power, they're going to abuse it. But if only you have the power to be charitable, then... and you use that power, and you don't misuse it, then that's what you're going to get back. Because there's no reason to steal anything if you aren't, if people are charitable. I mean, right? You have no reason to commit a crime if those who you would steal from are willing to give you whatever you need.
And there's more. There's markets and things like that just throw food away. That could actually go to somebody who's dying for a piece of bread.
That brings up a whole other concept. I mean, look outside, right? I've been here about 7 or 8 years in this house. I've planted over 200 trees, bushes. Everything is grows back every year.
And just to add a little bit to this, okay, Clint is not just mentally, this dwelling here is, I'm looking at it, and it's beautiful, and the work that you've done is.
Well, it's not mine, but it's certain. If I'm going to live here, I'm going to do my best to make it.
Right.
But my point is, because it's not mine, and because this particular house is in a housing association, and there's all these rules, and right. They won't let you have a. I mean, technically, there's people that do it, but. You can't have a garden. You can't do anything that would be reasonable or logical. You have to keep it up.
So right, you couldn't even plant food.
You have to have grass. I mean, why the hell would you have that rule, right? Oh, because it's ticky tacky, and So my point is, I've planted all those trees, right?
Yeah.
Plants and everything else. I've tended them. They've grown. And I got pictures back here where it was just absolutely bare. There was nothing.
Take
right?
a closer look.
Yeah, and so why is the question? Now I understand. I'm conscious of this. Most people I don't think are. Why are you planting flowers? Why are you planting trees that don't benefit? Right? Why aren't you planting an apple tree and an orange tree and a pear tree and an avocado tree? And why are you planting flowers instead of beans? And even if you don't ever eat a single thing in your own garden, you can give all of that away. And it's not pointless. You're not using the entire area's water for pointless fucking growth, right? You're actually helping people, pardon my language. You're actually able to then pick that, be charitable, give it away to your neighbors, and they can give you something. And at that point, you've started down the road of not needing the grocers, not needing a loan to buy food. You don't. At that point, you've created a different kind of commerce, a spiritual commerce. Hey, I've got 1,000 pounds of tomatoes here because each tomato, man, my mom used to grow tomatoes, and the amount of tomatoes she would get, she'd have a whole freezer full of just tomatoes, right? Just from 6-7 vines or 6-7 plants, and beans, and even today she has one single orange tree. It's like a tangerine tree, and that thing gives so much food, and they're delicious, and she feeds the whole neighborhood. My neighbor used to have a cherry tree, and that cherry tree produced. I can't even imagine if I were to, it's like guessing the amount of jelly beans in a jar, right? There's so many cherries that you could go and just pick them. And it grew over his fence. He said, yeah, just go ahead and pick them. Come in my yard anytime and pick my cherries. That's how I grew up, right? And I don't understand why is it not that way? Why are we doing this unreasonable thing? And I think I know the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, who would create such a thing unless you have investments in, grocers and banks and things that...
Food in general.
Right. So you know what the answer is. And the question that I have for people in general is, are you going to be able to break away from this type of nonsense, right? This type of unnatural behavior? Because if you don't, it's just getting worse and worse, right?
Now, are there farmers markets around here? Are there
Yeah, we have farmers markets here. Not like it was
where you could probably avoid. Yeah, I mean, in Jersey, there's a decent amount.
But I say again, why do you need a market?
True.
Why do I even have to sell? Why do I need to sell it? I can just if I'm giving something to you,
sure,
you're going to be like, well, geez, what can I do for him? Right, and at that point, you don't need this fake valuation. You don't need this artificial sense.
There are options, but there's never the real answer. There's options,
and maybe your answer is you're a carpenter and you're going to build me a new garage or raise me a barn so that I can have animals so that you can have milk. Right? There's no limit to what we could do and how we could exist if we got rid of these artificial systems. And I say again, they're all the same. Whether it's money, whether it's mono versus stereo, whether it's technology, which just means art. Right? It's very important to understand the word technology, it means art. And the more technology that you get, the more art becomes real in an artificial sense, right? It just means artifice. So the more we get into technology, the more true that scenario of the Matrix becomes, where everything becomes virtual.
Yeah.
And what are you doing then? You're now at that point. If you can be solely focused on art, on technology, then you're not looking around at reality, and you suddenly realize, I'm so focused on art, I'm so focused on playing and living in virtual realities. Where's my food coming from? How am I even living at this point? How am I sustaining myself? And the answer is, I'm completely dependent on government to feed me while I spend all my time in a virtual world, not taking care of myself, not taking care of others, killing people virtually, that kind of thing. This is why I say this is in my opinion, nothing could be more the term antichrist, which would be against the law of nature, right? Logos, against the law of the universe. Nothing could be more antichrist or anti-nature than technology, art. Art is, or technology, AI, artificial intelligence. What could be more anti-existence or anti-life than the AI, than the technology? So, as we worship this, there's churches now that worship the AI as God. And really what that means is they're worshiping, it's a new or neo-Satanism, if you will, because they're worshiping something that is so anti-reality, anti-God, anti-nature, anti-law, right? Just basic common sense, that truly I can think of nothing more fitting than an artificial intelligence and technology itself being, especially interconnected, the Internet of Things and all that, being what the Bible really refers to as the Antichrist, because it's the replacement of the replacement of reality, of existence, of life.
And if it is, in fact, learning from us, we're selfish.
Right.
We're A to Z, just what we are. It's learning from us, and I think that's a key thing right here.
The fucking AI is going to be a Kardashian. Do you want a fucking Kardashian as your god? I mean, that's what it's going to be. This shallow,
It's going to be, not only is it going to be Kardashian, but it's going to be...
it's going to be a Trump.
It's going to be all aspects of things that are bad, and and if there's any good that it picks up on, the bad programming will outweigh the good.
It has to.
And then we're...
And it's really
Fuck
frightening.
you, AI!
It's really frightening to think of that, but that's at a massive speed we are headed towards this.
And that's the thing. That's what they're going to say. We started it, but you programmed it. Through your phones,
absolutely.
Through your conversations, through this, through that. You programmed the AI.
Yeah.
It's just a reflection of what we've turned you into.
Right, and that's why, I'm here in Utah, here in Salt Lake. I'm down at the bottom of the county of Salt Lake in Draper, and then starts a new county. Well, this area right here into that new county, they're calling it Silicon Slopes. Not Silicon Valley, but it's the Silicon Slopes, referring to the mountains and the ski slopes. And the amount of technology has been moved. First, they built the
NSA Center.
The NSA Center,
and I didn't know. I didn't realize that it was going to happen. It was just like all I knew of was that it was being built here. And Clint, as he's going to describe here now, how it's profoundly affected the entire area.
The second that thing got built, suddenly Adobe moved in. Right, massive building. Then all these, we have Oracle. We have all these different, the names you know and the names you don't know. Suddenly, all this technology. Now that NSA Center, it takes massive amounts of water, has its own power lines. It's guarded. It's by a military base. Right. From there, it's interconnected with all these technology companies. Mm-hmm. That are now building here, and this place has transformed in the last 4 years, huh?
When did it officially? When like from the time?
Oh God!
Was it like 5 or 6 years ago?
We were still doing We Are Change back then, so it was 2004. 14, 15, something like that, 13 maybe.
Yeah.
But Truott led a protest against it. And the whole idea was to turn off the water supply, because if you turn off the water supply, then those quantum computers couldn't operate.
Yeah,
right. And then you've got I Am Flash here, which was here before any of this, which is this massive complex.
Isn't it in a sense like some kind of like nuclear reactor where the water has to cool the unit? You know, is that?
It definitely, the water cools the machines. I don't know if I'm not qualified to say it, but I was talking to my neighbor who works there, and he's like, we have our own water treatment plant because we use so much water. He was like almost afraid to tell me, because he's like, yeah, dude, we're the number one water user, and this place is huge. It's like 3-4 city blocks big, and they make all the chips and everything. And the other thing he told me, which I'll leave his name out of it, but I was pretty
to protect the innocent.
I wasn't surprised, but at the same time, I was like, "Oh, those bastards!" You know, it's just like them to do this. They live. So all the chips they make, right? This is partnered with Microsoft. So all the chips that they make there at the I Am Flash down here, they're all the same. In other words, they all have the maximum capacity of memory. This is how the system works. This is why the system is so fucked up. All those chips that they create, that they go in your phone and go in, they all have maximum possible capacity. But when they ship them out, they put capacitors on there. They put something that will stop that memory from being used. So if I order something and I get the cheapest version, they cover up the memory in the chip so that you can't use it. They put some kind of, I don't know what the proper term is, right? So if I order a 16 gig memory card, it's actually a 256 gig memory card.
Right, so say an iPhone, say like I think the highest one, it could be 512, but I think it's probably 256. Yeah. So it's capable of that so that they can mass produce
all chips are the same.
And then they just dumb it down
and then they gross you. They fuck you over. They say, well, okay, we'll give you this to the chip. Why would you do, if your intent is good, you would not do that, right? This is it's pure usury. It's pure to make something and then make it obsolete before it even leaves the factory, right? To downgrade it to the point where it's not even hardly usable. That is a sign, in my opinion, of the total degradation of society. And the fact that people don't know that.
One of many.
Right? The fact that people don't know that, and that they're willingly participating in basically fucking themselves over. Right? And again, I'm at home, so I'm just talking.
No worries.
It's just
F-bombs are allowed.
Everything is like that. This is what I'm trying to get across, though. Mm-hmm. Everything has been taken from mono to stereo. Everything has been taken and monetized, and that means everything has become evil. I mean, literally, if the whole goal, if your goal, another thing I say is like, would you do your job if you weren't
for no money?
If money wasn't involved, is your job something you would do for free? And the answer, 99.9% of the time, is hell no. Why would I work at McDonald's for free? Why would I be an IT guy for free? Why would I support a corporation that makes billions and pays me thousands? Why would I do that for free?
Right.
See, and that's, I think, a really important personal, like that self-help, like why are you then doing it? And I know the answer, it's for the money. Every answer for the money. Why are you playing music? Because someday maybe I'll be a rock star and I'll make money. Why are you doing that? And that actually means that you're going to be limited, because if your goal is money, then you're never going to be anything, because man, it's tough to be a rock star. You have to
money is all possibilities, and then of course the limitations.
Right, but if you take money out of the equation, the beautiful thing is you have no limitations except money. Right? There's no other limit but money. Now, if everybody got
what's that going to cost?
If everybody got out of it, then there'd be no limitations. That's my point. If you stop using money and you did exactly what we're talking about, well, guess what? Suddenly there's no limits to what we could do. But that would mean that the intent and the charitableness that means that the law of nature has to come back to us. It has to be at all times. It's not something that, it's not something that can be forgotten. It has to be a conscious decision at all times. That's why it's called the free will or free choice. It's not so much that you have free will. It's that you have a choice. Sorry, it's that you have a choice to be one thing or the other, right? That's kind of like voting, right? I can vote yes or no, but ultimately every vote I cast is a yes because I don't have the choice to say no, neither, please. I'm voting yes or no, but really that's a yes vote.
How many times have we heard that one phrase when people say, I don't have a choice, and then somebody says, we always have a choice.
Right, but you don't.
It's like
the
uncomfortable choice or the...
Well, see, the only real choice, I think, is to say no. And if you don't have the right to say no, then you don't actually have a choice, right? Oh, I have a choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That's my choice. That's not a choice. That's something being forced upon me. I don't want either.
Turd sandwich or a douche.
Right? It's like truth. Which would you rather do? Slide down a razor blade into a pool of alcohol or eat an apple with maggots in it? That's not a fucking choice. Oh, no, you can't say no. You can't say neither one. You can't say none of the above. Right? You have to choose. And so they've taken choice and they've made it false. Just like every fucking thing else. Everything is false. It's an artificial choice. Right? If you're in the Matrix, what choice can you make? You can't make any choice because you're stuck in the fucking Matrix. You're stuck in something that doesn't allow choice. You can't have choice in a controlled environment where everything is geared towards the negative in the real sense.
Well, once we know this and we know all the aspects and characteristics of the things that you've studied and researched and written about over the years, is there a possibility that knowing that at some point that people can be at peace with it, like have in their minds be free, like I know this is it, but I can separate myself from it and somehow.
I mean, that is, like I said, that is the choice. There's only one choice that people have, and that is to participate or not to participate. Right now, people are going to tell you all the time that we're in America, it's involuntary. You can't, you always have a choice, right? How's the song go? It says, Corey Hart.
Wear sunglasses at night?
No, maybe it's not Corey Hart. It's the one that says, you have the right to fight and never surrender, right? You
never surrender.
The anarchist movement or whatever it's called, I don't know what the fuck they call themselves now. They're always going to tell you the same thing. We get service at the barrel of a gun, right? We are forced to take these services. Really? You're forced to take a benefit even though the maxim of law says no benefit can be forced upon you? It's just not true. It is just not true. You are a volunteer. And the word volunteer has a very specific meaning in the legal language, which is the doctrine of master and servant. You are the servant, they are the master. They are offering you the chance to be in service, and you are taking it. Your actions are what defines that volunteerism, not some questionnaire or some box that you marked that said, yes, I volunteer to be a citizen. No, the fact that you're acting as a citizen, you're taking the benefits, you're doing everything you can to show that you are part of that system. You're using its money, which is a contract in and of itself, right? You cannot then say, I'm not doing this voluntarily. You can't act in a certain way and then pretend you're not.
Yeah, if you don't know the meaning of words, then you're in general that person is lying to themselves. They're fooling themselves. They're tricking. They're lying. The worst thing that people can say is, you're lying to yourself. Lying to yourself.
Right. Well, so think about that. You know, how does it go again? You have the right to fight and to never surrender, right? That means a whole army, the whole police force could be pointing guns at you, and you still have the right to not participate. Yeah, you might die, right? And that's the point, you see. Because when you apply force, when you apply, more importantly, the perception of force, right? Then
Which is all it takes these days.
All it takes is the perception of force. Then your choice becomes almost automatic, right?
Right.
You're in a situation like if you're in the Matrix, right? Your choices are bound by the rules of the Matrix. So in this society, as long as you're participating, and like I said, if you use the money of the United States, then you're bound by the law of the United States. Because the second you use someone else's property, you're bound by their law, right? That's a very simple concept.
I like money. I like money.
Well, I just, like I said, I mean, I can see this beautiful, beautiful future that we could very much have. But the cost of that future is being willing to accept death. Being willing to be killed for your belief system. Because, I mean, how many times do you hear? Yeah, you could call it that, but I mean, how many times do you hear?
The new martyr.
Well, how many times do you hear, you know, of stories of men who braved? Well, yeah, actually, they're employees of government that we're pretending are anything but, and they're soldiers and they're going in, they're getting killed for wars that they don't really have any idea why they're being fought. They're paid mercenaries and they're getting killed.
And the ones that do realize it, they get ostracized.
Right. The ones that say no, they get put in prison. And those are the men who I think are the bravest. They are the ones that refuse to fight and kill people against.
But in our upside down society, they are the cowards. They are the non-patriots.
What are you fighting for? You know, and it's such a brainwash, such a mind fuck. It's such a brainwashing extravaganza that we think these people are heroes when they're prostitutes. They're paid mercenaries, right? The very reason that the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence was written was because the standing army of frickin' England, the King's Army, was here doing exactly what the army is, you know, National Guard, the army, the police are doing now. And we're supposed to think that that's somehow a good thing, that we now have a standing army completely against, right? You killed the idea of the militia. The idea of the militia was to protect the state against the federal government from encroachment, right? That's why it says, you know, if you see, you have the right to replace the government, right? In the Declaration, I believe it was, that when it gets, I'm sorry, I can't quote it right now.
And, you know, when a government gets out of control, that you've got the right to take up arms against it.
But you don't have that right anymore because you're no longer members of the state. You're no longer the people. You are employees of the United States. So you'd be committing treason by doing so. But if you were in the militia protecting your state, that wasn't treason. Right? Because you weren't part of the United States. You were foreign to it. If you're a private citizen of the state, before the United States ever came around, you know, before the Civil War, I should say, before it all got incorporated, your militia service, and the reason that they wouldn't, you know, they wanted to keep the guns, is to fight against the United States. The United States is just an extension of London. Extension of the Vatican, right? You're in a situation now where you voluntarily left the state through the birth certificate process. You know, your parents put you into this situation, and now you're part of the United States, not the 50 states, right? You're not part of those people anymore, and therefore you have no right to act against government because you've made government like a king. You've made the central government, this foreign entity in Washington, D.C., you've made it like your king. And therefore, you're in that master and servant or voluntary state where you no longer have the choice. You no longer have the ability to follow anything in that Declaration of Independence. The Constitution doesn't apply to you. It only applied to those people who were not part of the United States. You see, this is the whole problem, is that we've all voluntarily left the real world and we've been put into this fictional thing. And it's getting worse and worse and worse to the point where we don't even... That concept is gone from people. Right? The whole purpose of a state, a people, that's what the word state means, was to be protective of each other. The militia was set up to protect your family and your state, your people, your tribe, essentially, against the encroachments of these corporations,
right.
The Crown Corporation and the United States Corporation, the district, right? District, I always was fascinated when I was looking at the etymology of these things, and the word district comes from Caesar, right? Caesar, in the Bible, wanted to tax every man, and then you have the Pope, in whatever that was, I can't remember the name of it, saying that every man, woman, and child must be under the church, the corporation, right, the Vatican. So it's just a continuation of, and the word tax in the Bible actually means to register. So what's happened is we've stopped acting like men, meaning men and women and children, and we've started acting like employees. And therefore, we have no power. We have no constitutional protections. The reason we don't have constitutional protections is because the Constitution only protects your inherent rights as a people. But if you're no longer a people, you're no longer part of a state, then you have no fucking constitutional rights. And yet they play that. They talk about the Constitution all the time, man. It's so pathetic. And it's pathetic to listen to alternative people, alternative radio, talk about the Constitution as if it applies to us. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, most of the crap that's in the alternative movement, I'm sorry, it's mostly crap. Whether it's the Federal Reserve being private, whether, all of these fallacious things, the reason that they're fallacious is because we are not those private people anymore. We're employees. We don't have the rights that are inherent by God. We only have the rights that are given to us by government. And hey, Title 42, Section 1981 tells you exactly what your rights are. You have the right to be harmed, to be taxed,
tested on,
registered, licensed, and extorted. That's your right, because you're an employee of the United States. You're not separate or foreign from the United States as a state. You are under the United States, not over it. You see? And that's everything. If people could just understand
Do
that.
you understand?
Right. And that takes away choice. That's entering into a matrix of law that is not under God. It's not under the private law of the state. Therefore, your choice is now gone. See, once you're in that programming, right, then choice becomes that illusionary choice. You have a choice between two evils. But you don't have the choice to say no. And the choice to say no is everything. It literally is the only real choice, is to be able to say no, because that's where you're talking about the God-given rights, the constitutional rights to protect inherent God-given rights. They protect the right to not be harmed, to not be forced to do anything, to not have all this law put upon you. But the second you leave that space and you enter into this fictional, corporate structure, that right to say no, the only right you actually have, is taken away. And the only rights that are given to you are the same, if you're an employee, you have rights, right? Doesn't mean you have the right to say no. Right? I mean,
it's the rights that they've drawn up for you.
Yeah, what would you do? What would your employer do if you said, well, no, I'm not going to do that? He'd fire you, right? Well, what does the United States do when you say, no, I'm not going to follow that immoral law?
Jail.
It makes you into it takes away all of your rights that it's assigned to you, and it makes you a prisoner, basically puts you in it takes you from the open air prison and puts you into the the hole, basically. Mm-hmm. So I mean, like I said, if people would just understand this, the problem is that we've all been tricked into joining something.
Sure.
Right? And yes, it is voluntary. There's never a way that you can say it's not voluntary. And if I could just make people see that one thing ruins almost the entire patriot mythology, the entire alternative movement, that you do have a choice, that you can quit the United States anytime you want to. You can expatriate. You can do all kinds of things. And just the fact that you can expatriate and take another nation as your sovereign proves what the United States is. People don't consider this, but we're still in that feudal tendency. That we're still in that feudal age. It's a neo-feudalism where you're pledging allegiance to a king, a virtual king, or a corporation, that's basically one person. So you could say it's a king. Right, we're back in. We had that freedom, we had that opportunity to choose, and then they came in, they created the birth certificate, they did all these things, and slowly we got all drained back into the same exact fucking situation we were when we started, which was we're now in the United States. Basically, that means we're in the United Nations, and we have no choice again. We're now under a ruling king. But the concept of a king has been replaced by the corporation, which is many persons acting as one. Well, it's still a single voice. It's still a single power. The final decision is still a single one. Therefore, it's a king. We haven't left. Nothing has changed, is the point. It's just modernized, and through technology and entertainment and public education, we have no idea what the hell's happened to us. When we sit here and we wonder, why is this happening? Why don't I have why I don't want those two for president? I don't want anybody for president. What the hell? Why don't I feel like I have any power? Right? And the simple answer is that government recognizes only men of God, sons of God, people who are denied the law of the United States, the law of man. Right? That's the only ones it recognizes that has power. Why? Well, it's real simple. Because you wouldn't use the money of the United States, the credit of the United States. The second you get out from under the debt, either a contract debt or a money debt, then you are no longer bound in any way. Right? So you can relinquish that citizenship, which is a commercial vessel, citizenship, right? Ship has a very specific, there's a reason they say ship. So the real trick is government only operates. The only way government can stay in power is that it continuously causes us to harm one another. And that harm can be clandestine, it can be something we don't even notice we're doing. We're ignoring the homeless man on the street. We're ignoring our duty to be charitable to each other. We're ignoring everything that is part of the law of nature. And by doing so, even though it doesn't seem like it, we're actively participating in a basically a corporation that represents evil, represents harm. Harm is everything. You see, if you are charitable to all men at all times, if you are loving to all men at all times, even your enemies, if you don't judge, because the only way they can really get you is they want you to accuse somebody of something, take them to court, and all cases are monetary. Right? There's not a single case in the history of all the courts that is not based on money. That's what the courts handle. It's a court registry investment system. All that money goes in, and they make tons of money off of the court system. Some of those courts, at this point, they're corporations owned by the judges themselves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's fucking ridiculous.
What was it? The patent scandal which is on one of the platforms there, where people that have been in business for a long time, or even a short time, they will get a letter from a lawyer, a law firm, to cease and desist, and all of these letters come out of a district in eastern Texas where the lawyers are related to the judges, and it's just this shell companies, the whole deal, where they just
people. The reason for that is because people think these are Article 3, if I'm not mistaken, Article 1, Article 3 courts. They think they're constitutional courts. They're not. They are. It would be the equivalent of a union or if I get in trouble as an employee in a corporation, I go in and I get administered, right? I'm not. There's no justice. There's no. Right, you're already guilty the second you go into court. Right, you're already property. So property, there's no justice for property. Property can't own property, so you own nothing. Right, you go into court as a piece of property, as a person, and you're administered. Right, there's no. This is not a court system in the way that people believe it is, because it's not. It's part of the United States. In other words, it's not a court of the people, right?
Yep.
It's not your peers, it's not your family, it's not your tribe judging you. It's an administrative judge of the United States, an employee of the United States, right? And make no mistake, Congress are listed in U.S. Code as employees of the United States. They're not congressmen. The United States isn't it's a corporation. It's not a real, right? It's Washington, D.C. Where is the United States? Now people will say it's all around us. No, those are
out the window.
Those are states that are united in compact. But where's the United States? Where is it? It's a piece of paper. See, that's the problem. All courts are of the United States, which is the seat of government in Washington, D.C., not even part of the 50 states. It's a foreign entity that we have all been tricked into joining. My point is that all of this is based on choice. And all we have to do, I mean, it sounds really simplistic, right? Like, wait a minute,
say no.
There's way more to this, but yeah, that's the whole key to this, is to say no to the devil.
Get enough people to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
I'm not going to respect the law of man over the law of God. I'm not going to respect lawyers, which are in Scotland are called devils. Right? I'm not gonna be part of deviling, which is a word you can look up in Black's Law. It means basically to be a lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. It's to practice law. You gotta understand that this is the ultimate battle between good and evil, or what you would call God and Satan. And Satan only means
adversary.
Right. What is adversary to reality or truth? Right? God is truth. Yeah. Right? So take away all the religious shit and you get down to the nitty gritty. That's all we're talking about, is we're either going to be in truth or we're going to be in lies. We're going to be in art or technology, the Antichrist, or we're going to be in Christ, which is simply the personification of Logos, or the law of the universe, law of nature. Universe is how God is defined in the Bible. There was no choice to believe in God or not. That's not how they wrote the Bible. Jehovah, or YHVH, the Hebrew and all the Chaldean, all those different, they all have the same meaning. They weren't talking about something that you can or cannot believe in. They're saying the universe, Jehovah, right, the living sentient being, or the living God, right, has a law, and that law was personified as Christ. Right? And the example of how to follow the law of the universe, the law of nature, is through Christ. Not to worship Christ, not to put Christ on a pedestal and wear a cross around, not to use idolatry. And that's what the church did. They put Christ and made him an idol. No, you're supposed to, even in the Bible, it says the only way to God, right? In other words, to nature, to going back to the law, is through Christ, which means that the only way you can be saved is to act according to the law of nature, which is personified in Christ. Christ is your example to follow. But the church and in order for the Pope to become the Antichrist or the replacement for Christ, right, the vicar of Christ, right, in order for him to get to the position and be able to change the law of the Bible and change the Bible and then they had to create this this religious version, this idolatry that is called Christianity. Officially Christianity, not real Christianity, not following Christ in order to worship God, but worshiping Christ in place of God. Right? That's what they've done to people. And so you're worshiping the law of God, but you're not following it. You're worshiping it as an idol. You're saying, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and therefore I'm saved, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to follow any laws. I don't have to know the Bible. All I have to know is that I believe in Christ, and therefore, this is all complete nonsense. I'm sorry. And I'm not sorry. Actually, it needs to be said more and more, because the second you start following Christ, instead of worshiping it as an idol, which means following the law of God, suddenly you're in truth. Because it doesn't allow for anything that's not true. It doesn't allow for art to be worshipped as in idolatry, right? Suddenly, there you are. Now, if people could just come down from either loving or hating the Bible because of religion and just focus on what it actually says, my God, it's just, you don't have to.
There are a lot of people out there that are reading it and that they are adhering to it and doing things. Maybe not. They might not be doing it in its entirety, but they're making an effort. They're making.
No, I get it, and I'm just as guilty and to be admonished as anyone else, because I have not. I'm a hypocrite, and I fully acknowledge that I'm a hypocrite.
Sinner.
Right, and that's okay. To the point where I'm trying to develop the knowledge or reintroduce the knowledge so that we can actually not be hypocrites. Because there is no, Bible warns you can't be lukewarm. You can't be a citizen of man's law and be under the law of man, which is immorality, and also be under God's law, which is morality. Right, spiritual law versus we can't be under the written law and the unwritten law, because they're directly opposed to each other. You can't be halfway. That's why I say, the choice is yes or no. I will be under God's law or I will not be. And by choosing to be, or volunteering to be under the law of man, the legal law, you have made that choice. You have given up your right to say no.
And most people have no idea what they've done. And their parents have no idea what they've done to them, and it's just a cycle of deception. And a lot of people have said, even Melonhead Jones has said, it's kind of like they have to tell you what they're going to do to you, but nobody walks up to a parent who's about to, deliver a child and say, oh, by the way, this birth certificate is going to be is anti-Christ, it's anti-this, it's anti-that, it's enslaving you, nobody's ever going to say that. So how would we ever know without people such as yourself saying, okay, this is what's being done to you, and this is what in the Bible it says. Don't be this. Don't do this. Don't be this. Don't do this.
And yet you still call yourself a Christian, even though you're doing everything against the Bible, which, again, that means that you're in idolatry, that you're worshiping the symbol of the law, but you're not following it, right? The symbol of law is Christ. And I can't stress...
They should be shamed.
Well...
I would love to have a pulpit where I could shame them.
But see, that's the thing. I want to
actually a pulpit that I could pay for that you could shame them.
No, I'm not.
No. I mean, just in general, so people understand what they're doing.
I'm equally a hypocrite as everybody else.
Yeah, but you've taken the time to understand.
Well, and that's the due diligence part. The difference when you come from complete ignorance, right? Then you have no place else to go but up, and that's where most people are, and where I used to be. Now, I can't stress enough, there's a lot of people out there who, a lot of the so-called alternative or truth movement or patriot, whatever the hell it's called, that are offering this is how you get remedy, or this is how you get rid of your Social Security, or this is how you get rid of this, or this
Paying
is how
taxes.
right? And I'm here to tell you, none of that matters. None of that matters. There's only one choice, right? Yes or no. Just because I get rid of my Social Security number and I start calling myself a national instead of a citizen, look it up. A citizen is a national, right? It's all bullshit because you're not leaving man's law. You're just calling yourself by a different name, right?
You're just rearranging chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, it's really no different than saying, well, I'm a Methodist, I'm not a Catholic, or I'm a Catholic, I'm not a Baptist. You're still in idolatry. You haven't changed anything by changing your status or your name. The idea, and in the Bible is very clear, you're to have no status. You're to have no name except your God-given, which the legal realm identifies as the God-given name, the first name. The name your parents give you. The last name is not what your parents give you. That was already there. They didn't come up with that, so that was.
I was trying
already
to
the
find out
legal name.
where that came from because some surnames are just like, good.
Well, it's, in the Latin, if you go to the Latin, there's the cognomen and the. It's in my book. I can't remember what they are now. And as I age, I'm finding I can't remember half the shit anymore. But there are there's the family name, and then there's the legal name, and you mix the Christian name with the surname. The last name is the most powerful. So the last word that you speak when it comes to your title or your name is the one that is considered in law. If I say Clint, and I don't say any last name, I can't be identified unless I have something like a Social Security number.
And that's why they can't do anything with illegals that come across the border because they're not citizens. And this is something that Jones pointed out. They're like, the police never do anything to these illegals when they come over the border. And then you find out, like through through talking to you and listening to your podcast, that it's just like they don't have a status.
Well,
they're not from here. There's nothing we can.
Well, see, but you
can't get anything from them.
That's true and untrue because they do have a status.
Well, they have
their status is under the law of nations, and they're part of Mexico or they're part of something else. So in that way, what they want to do is they want to identify.
Well,
you.
can they extract anything from them, like money wise, like they can do to us?
That's why they can say you're illegal because you're in the wrong place. You've got a status in this nation, but not in this nation. But if you didn't have a status in that nation, there's nothing. I mean, the Amish, for instance, cross the border from U.S. to Canada all the time. And they're not messed with because they got their little uniforms on. People know they're Amish, and they can't be fucked with. They're not bound by that border, right? Because they're following a certain law, and they're not participating in that false identity game, that flattering fictional title. They're not getting necessarily the benefits that come with the title either. So there's a give and take, and that's probably the big thing is, well, how do I live my life without money? How do I live my life without insurance? How do I live my life without protection? And of course the answer is I can't do it alone. I have to have you. You have to make the choice that you're willing to die for your beliefs. You have to make the choice that you're willing to say, fuck all this. I'm leaving the Matrix for good. And what happens when you leave the Matrix? It's kind of like there's no benefits, right? You wear crappy clothes or homemade clothes. You have to eat what you can scrounge or grow, right? Suddenly you've lost all this ease, which, another sin is ease, right? So you've lost the ability to engross and to harm people, right? You don't have protection anymore from government to cause harm. And like I said, government has no power over men unless you've harmed another man or another corporation, another person, essentially, right? So if you're not doing harm, they have no power over you. If you're not claiming to be their property, in other words, I'm Clint Richardson with Social Security number this, they have no power over you. Now, is that to say they're not going to beat your heads? No. Like I said, you got to be willing to stand in front of a fucking gun and say, no, I will not yield. No, I'm willing to die for my beliefs. But how many people... This is the stuff that we talk about nights, and we talk about this romanticism right? About people, the founding fathers, they were so brave, and they were, right?
Nah.
Right. This is something that you either know right now or you don't. Whether you would die for your beliefs, whether you would die for what's right and wrong. You know that right now. I don't have to tell you. No one's going to be able to teach it to you. You know it. The problem is you've never been shown
how to do it,
or what is right and wrong, because everything is wrong right now, and everybody knows
everything is wrong.
Everybody knows, from the billionaire to
we believe that it's right,
from the billionaire to the bum on the street. Everybody knows it's wrong. But the problem is, without the bum, the billionaire couldn't exist, because that's built into capitalism, built into the system. It's got a name, and I can't remember, but a certain percentage of poverty. People have to be in poverty in order for a certain percentage to be absolutely wealthy. That's part of our system, and it's got a name, and I can't remember the name. But I was shocked when I read it long ago, and helped me to understand that the problems that we have are not symptoms. They're part of the whole model that we have, is that people have to be harmed.
The system hasn't failed. It was built this way.
Right. It was built by some very evil people, and it continues to be built, as we speak. They're passing new laws and new regulations and new this, and it all has to do with harm. Because we live in a system that is absolutely 100% built on profiting from harm. The absolute opposite of what it would be like, as we discussed before, if you lived a charitable life. So, why do I keep going on even though I'm freaking shadow banned and censored and all that? Because I truly believe that someday I can find some people that understand this, that are willing to die for their beliefs, willing to die to defend the truth, to defend nature, right? And I believe that we're going to get together and we're going to, it's not a cult. It's just reality, right? Reality has become a cult. Truth has become a cult. And I'm like, whoa, something's wrong here. Why is truth being demonized? Well, we know the answer, right? Because everything's artificial. So, anyway. Remember when we said, hey, we sat down, we had a little bit of we had a shake, a protein shake with some strawberries and some blueberries. And
delicious.
We start talking about the Federal Reserve, and I'm like, we should if we're going to record, we should do it. Now, well, we haven't even talked about the Fed. So funny.
Well, we have to fit it into this and get it over to the program director. We've got we're at 132 here, so we can go to 157, and then we can send this off, and then we can record whatever we want. Right? We got plenty of space.
Can you edit it?
I'm not good at editing.
So we need to.
I could give this to you. You could plug it into your editing machine, and then you could edit. You could.
When does that have to be in?
Today.
Like tonight or today?
I would have to. Let me see here, because Jules she messaged me. So
the reason I ask is I really gotta pee.
All right, do your thing, man. Do your thing. All right, I can actually pause it. Speaking of whom, there you are, hey baby, what you doing? All right, so the reality of the world, our status as United States citizens, and you wanted to do an update on the Fed, or just kind of reiterate, or?
Well, it's just one of various demons that have been put out, to blame. And the problem with hypocrisy is that no one ever puts the blame where it belongs, which is personally, right? I am the problem. No one wants to say, I am the problem. And
my belief in the system makes it real. My belief in their fiction makes it real.
Not just belief, but actually the use
and the participation,
the volunteers. And see, I suppose that's why I'm not very popular, is because I'm constantly telling people, look, stop blaming everybody but yourself. I mean, the second you come down and you take responsibility, what is freedom but self-responsibility? Self-government is being responsible for your own actions, right? So the epitome of everything is self-responsibility, and yet you want to blame the mythical, Fed or whoever it is that you want to blame for all the problems that you're creating for yourself. Right. That's the basic That's the basic problem with especially Americans, but pretty much the whole, corporate structure of nations, is that nobody wants to take responsibility for the problems. And that goes back to, well, yeah, there's a problem, so I'll donate some money to the United Way, which will probably spend 80% of that money in investments and advertising, and the people will be starving next to the United Way, who is supposed to be helping them because they don't have any money to support. Right?
I'll give you a real or near real-time example of, the work I've done supporting systems. And so when you go and you work on someone's system, they'll either say, hey, I have a problem, or I have a problem, can you take a look at this? All right? And so you either fix the issue, and then if that same day something else happens, right? It had to be somebody else's fault because someone else other than them touched the computer. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like them giving away responsibility. Like, they're like, I didn't, nobody wants to be the person who caused the computer to have a problem where it's not working properly. So they always seek out, even if it is someone who is, an IT person, to be able to do it. So they're like, oh, no, it must have been so-and-so because he was here working on a problem that it must have been the last person that touched it other than me that did it. So it's always starting the responsibility, pushing it off to someone else.
To the point,
nobody wants to be that person.
To the point that you will actually blame, knowing that you're the problem, you will actually blame someone else, get them in trouble or get them fired for the problem you created. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. That's what we've been indoctrinated to do. Instead of taking self-responsibility, fixing the problem ourselves or learning how to, right? We always put everything off. And my personal story is, as a post-production, guy in sound, we'd get the shittiest recordings of things, and we're expected to fix it. Oh, it's okay, though. The common thing in Hollywood, that's all right, they'll fix it in post. Well, there is no fixing crappy audio, right?
Yeah, you get it crap, yeah.
Right, so
you would have to fit it in or clip it into something else that was good audio.
Right.
And then blur.
So the only good directors in Hollywood are the ones that realize sound is more important than video. And most people would be like, well, wait a minute, video is everything. Yeah, I'll invite you to go watch a movie without sound. It's a horrible experience. Now, you can listen to radio, you can listen to sound
and then
without
picture in your
visual.
own mind what's going on. Or how,
so, your good directors are all about the sound, and they'll actually not do what most do and ignore the sound until the end and say it'll all get fixed in post-production. No, do the job right in the first place, right? But no, everybody wants to put it on. Someone else will fix it, right? If I go to a restaurant and this couple, especially here in Utah, they have 5-10 kids, right? And they make a mess, just ice cream on the floor and food all over the place. The table looks like a freaking tornado.
It's okay. We're a family.
They're paid to clean up after me. Really? $10 an hour and you're I mean...
I feel the same way. Like, if I can do something to clean up myself and make less of a mess... Because I don't want someone coming in and saying, what an effing pig
and that's
that filth was.
That's an ingrained quality that my parents put, that goes back to my childhood. I'll never change that. I'll never leave a mess for someone else to clean up if I can help it. Mm-hmm. And when I do, I feel so guilty. I'm like, no, let me clean that up. You don't have to, And they're like, no, it's my job. Right, so we've even been trained to be like, oh, it's my job to clean up after everybody else, because of money.
Right.
That's what I'm paid for. I wouldn't last 2 seconds. But clean that shit up, man. Control your damn kids. I'd be fired from a restaurant.
We're animals,
right? I mean, yeah. I can't believe that we've degraded to this point. I can't believe that I live in a society that is so horrifically retarded at this point that nobody has any self-control or no self-governance whatsoever, and freedom.
It's a disconnect. It's a disconnect from awareness. And the cell phones aren't helping at all.
And the Bible. That's what the Bible's about. It's about self-governance. It's about self-responsibility. Nothing else, really. That's really what sets you free.
Self-control.
Yeah. So, and government means
self-control of your own mind.
Government means mind control. So, self-government means self-control. That's the last thing that a slave master wants, is for his slaves to have control over their own fate, right? So yeah, you have these enemies like the Fed. I mean, the Fed is probably the number one thing that's blamed, and people talk out their ass, right? G. Edward Griffin, horrible researcher. Fucking plagiarized.
Just call him Eustace Mullins.
Plagiarized Eustace Mullins. Plagiarized all these things. I actually was friends with one of his assistants back in L.A. We were changed, and she's like, yeah, he doesn't really. He doesn't know stuff. He doesn't really. I mean, he's like a lot of people. They're in it for the money. They're in it for the fame. They're in it for a reason that is not in what they are portraying, right?
It's not a selfless thing.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call myself selfless. I mean, I'm in it to try and get people, rein them back from this, right? I mean, so it certainly would benefit me to have people that I can be charitable to and have them be charitable to me. So I can't say I'm immune from that. But when it's a monetary, when the goal is mammon, in any way, when you're valuing something that is artificial and that's your goal, then you've stepped into evil. It's the root of all evil, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the Fed, all you have to do is look at. All you really have to do is look at the congressional record to see that the whole Congress comes in at it's Christmas night and all Congress went home, and it was just. And you find out, if you actually look, that's the way Congress works every day. There's absentee congressmen at every session. And if those congressmen that were absent, which wasn't as many as they portray, were to have been there, the frickin' bill still would have passed. Right?
Texted in.
Yeah, it was a matter of they knew it was going to pass, so they didn't even bother showing up, right? And they weren't going to vote no if they did show up, right? Because voting no is
so they don't show up. Does it automatically become okay? I'm for whatever it is.
No, it's like a missing vote. They just have to have a certain amount there to get to the point. Yeah. But the vote tally, if you look at the record, was already there. If every single congressman that was absent would have showed up and voted no, it still would have passed.
Right.
But see, that's a detail that doesn't fit with the narrative. It doesn't fit with making an enemy out of something so that you don't take responsibility for yourself. And again, it's all about making an enemy, because the sociopath has no existence without enemies.
What was interesting and sad and disgusting was, and I got to give I have to give credit and kudos to Jon Stewart, not his real name, but he went to Capitol Hill with a bunch of the first responders, people that are still suffering and still their lives because of that day. And I mean, it was just watching it. It was just wow, unbelievable. And that there was large portions of people, of congressmen and people that just never showed the fuck up. They just never showed up. And then you heard things after the fact, where people were interviewing Stewart, and he said after we get through this, he said, then we're gonna talk about the burn pits. And the burn pits of people that have, they just over there in the desert, they just, throw toxins and just back up, hit the brakes and dump, all kinds of filth and just, God knows what. And then just set it on fire. So I saw a documentary about how these people, this one guy was his whole neck with the throat cancer and had neck cancer and all kinds of shit. So to add to what Clint was saying about, how, they're not there, they don't show up. And for them to not show up for something like that is just, they should just be immediately like shown the door, like, you're done. You don't show up for something like this. I mean,
but that would imply that we had the choice to do so, right? Oh, sure. No, they're elected and protected by law in their actions, right? And that's really the epitome of everything is, again, the law of man protects harm, protects criminal activity, protects immorality, protects everything that is against self-government and duty, responsibility, do unto others as you... See, this is the whole problem, and I don't think people really grasp that, that everything is based on harm. But once you do see it, then you can't excuse them for what they do, but you can at least understand that the problem is not them, the problem is the system. The problem is that they're part of a system, they're employees of a system that allows them to do this and even rewards that kind of behavior.
They were out getting free haircuts, they were out getting free... But Clint did a podcast where he pointed out like all of the just what they get as...
It basically works like this, okay? When you're elected as a senator or congressman, you get a certain amount of money. And they like, we don't make very much money. We're just senators. We're public servants. Yeah, bullshit. You're a board of directors of a corporation. But on the side, they get these expense accounts, essentially. And if you combine all the expense accounts that they get, from free haircuts to a gym to a personal expense account where they can spend it on anything, and they buy houses and they buy shit for themselves, right? If you add it all up, it was I think it was in the Senate, it was $4 million a year that they get in expense account funds. $4 million
per congressman, per senator.
Per senator. I think Congress was a little less, but the point is, we only get paid, $100,000 or whatever it is, but your expense account, tax-free, is $4 million fucking dollars.
No wonder they don't rock the boat.
And the more committees you sit on, the more expense account money you get. And this is why they're like, I want to be on that committee. The more committees I sit on, the more... And then the worst...
I want to serve the public.
Yeah, the worst part of it, though, is the ethics committee, right? Because the ethics committee...
They don't have any to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, they make their own ethics, and then when a congressman or a senator does a crime, as insider trading or whatever it is, then they don't take it to court. They don't go in front of a judge. They go in front of themselves. The actual senatorial ethics committee, which is senators sitting on a committee
deciding what's good for senators.
Right. And so if you're a senator, I compared it to prison or a criminal gang. They all know each other so well. They all know what crimes they're committing. So if I rat you out, guess what? You're going to rat me out.
When it comes time for me to...
So they go to the ethics committee and they say, you did this, but it's okay. We'll overlook it. And you look and there's like hundreds of complaints, thousands of complaints against these senators, but they never get past the Senate Ethics Committee unless it's a public thing, right? They never get out of that committee to go in front of a judge. So there's no justice whatsoever for crimes committed by senators. It's organized crime set up in a way that appears to be legitimate, but it's the worst kind of organized crime because it's inside of government.
Well said. Well said.
Well said.
Well said. It's unbelievable. I remember listening to that podcast and hearing how you were breaking down their expense budget and everything. And a congressperson might make like $180,000 a year. Like, how much are they spending of that when they're? I mean, what is life but expenses?
Exactly, right?
And if you vote the right ways, if you vote with your lobbyists and everything, you're going to be there. Is Orrin Hatch still a senator here in Utah, or was he ever? Or am I mixing him up with some other serpent?
I think he was voted out, if I'm not mistaken.
Or he just decided, I'm going to take all of my money.
That was the other senator down south that got voted. I think Hatch is still there, actually. You know, I stopped worrying about Utah politics because it's controlled by the church, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
The church, the Mormon church.
Yeah, there's nothing I can do about the fact that this is a Mormon state.
Mormon.
Even though that is technically an illegal thing, it's very, very well acknowledged by most people that the government is the church. And
Which
church is the government.
the joke of separation of church and state. Never. There are two pillars that hold each other up in their crime and their sons of bitches.
If you think about it, it's really the perfect thing because the state is justified by the church because it protects the church, and the church is justified by the state because it apparently regulates because it's the origin of the state, but it's also because you're supposed to have this check and balance, right? So it's this perfect criminal syndicate where you separate the powers, but really the purpose of the separation is to protect the crime.
The Pope of the Holy See. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pope of the Holy See.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are merely ships out to the Pope's See. Yeah, it's like I said, man. All this boils down to: are we going to keep participating to the point where we're just going to all get killed, or that it's going to get so bad that we can't even function as a society anymore? We get taken over, we become China.
The Hunger Games.
Right. So I mean, I will openly state that we are in a spiritual war. It's a battle between truth and fiction, and you can call that anything. Those two words, truth and lies, that can be called good or evil. That can be called nature and artificialness. That can be, you can take those words, God and the devil, and you can pretty much compare them to anything that is real versus anything that is false. And that's what we're in. And I have a feeling that it's going to be a much more bloody war than any we've experienced. And I think it's going to start with people like me and people that want to escape this thing being hunted down. I mean, I think
Logan's Run.
Sure. I mean, if you any of those models, Brave New World,
Hunger Games.
Yeah, those horrible people who
Maze
left
Runner.
the system. Yeah, I mean it's a common theme, and you might call it predictive programming. You might call it prophesizing. Because what is a prophecy? But if you allow this to happen, then the result will be this. It's not foretelling the future. Prophecy is timeless. It doesn't apply to a certain time, which is what's so important about the Bible, is that it's like, look, if you fuck up, and this is going to happen. It's not saying this is going to happen. It's saying if you fuck up and
you worship false idols and all these other, and other things. You're heading down a path of
it's a book
unnatural.
It's a book of consequences, basically, and the consequences are self-evident, right? If A plus B will equal C, you can't get around that, right? The second you ignore truth and live in fiction, this will happen. The second you take a title or a name that isn't yours, that you pretend to be something you're not, this will happen, right? Because you're becoming property.
Right.
Don't be surety. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't use money. It's all there, and it's that's what prophecy. Prophecy is
the
not
power
the same
of
as
prophecy.
prediction. Prediction is something else, right? You predict the future. Prophecy is, look, you mess up, this will be the consequences.
The power of prophecy. This is Tex Mars and the power of prophecy.
Again, those kind of guys, the intent is just not there,
Yeah. All right. All right, so we got about 4 minutes here on this one before I get up to the mothership. Anything that you wanna talk about the gleaming, or do you want to just leave that for another time, or is there anything you want to follow up with, or to your people out there? Because I mean, we'll get this up there, and then we can, you can get it over to, you can post it on your WordPress, or
that's the project.
Say to your people.
I'm working on a big giant vaccine documentary, but that's a whole other can of worms. But this book, I'm writing a book proposal actually, because I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to limit myself anymore to this screwed up alternative movement, because it's not a
wonderful decision.
It's a stagnant pile of crap, is what it is, and it's never going anywhere because we limit ourselves to ourselves.
Yes,
right. It's like self-nihilism, right? So I want to get a book proposal into the hands of an agent, and if anybody knows any agents, I want to be clear, because my goal is not money. My goal is to be heard and to get this out there. I'm writing a book about the Matrix and how it actually applies to the book Simulacrum and Simulation, which is what it's based on, what it's plagiarized from. And, most people who see the Matrix have no idea what the hell it's about, which it's about hypocrisy, right? Oh, the ultimate hypocrisy, or what is called simulacrum. And so I'm willing to give, if I can find an agent, then I'm willing to give that agent who can get me into debates and get me into public speaking, get me heard and known. You can have it all. I don't want the money. I want to get out there, right? So the more out there you can get me, then the more the agent who allows that to happen, the gatekeeper essentially, the more you'll get for yourself. That's my, because I think the only way to defeat this system is to
use it, pay the devil,
is to take the money out of the equation, right? So
give the devil what he wants,
right?
To be able to,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can have all your money. It's not real. It's not going to make me happy. I already know that. Just get me out there so we can start making some changes and stop gatekeeping all the good people and putting all this shit out there. Right, that's my goal. I don't. Will it work?
Sounds
I
good.
don't know.
It's a move. It's a grand chess move.
Well, it's
20 seconds.
Yeah, it's intention. What's your intention? Is your intention to make money, or is your intention to actually change the world? And help people. And
beautiful.
There it is.
All right. I hope you guys enjoy this, and more to come. All right.